Welcome to the White Rabbit podcast. I'm the White Rabbit, also known as Nicola Charles, and I am running for the federal Senate with the Great Australian Party. And thank you for joining us on our broadcast today. This podcast is called The State of the Commonwealth. I used to really enjoy the State of the Union addresses in America. So we thought today we'd have a look at the state of our Commonwealth ahead of the US election. And I've got two fantastic guests with me today, both former senators. I feel like I'm in royal company. So we've got former Queensland Senator Len Harris and former WA Senator Rod Cullerton. Welcome to the show, guys. How are you?
Well, I'll let you go first, Len.
Yeah, great, Nicola. It's very, very appropriate to be addressing the state of the Commonwealth. And as we go this afternoon, people are going to be quite shocked to learn what has been done to the Commonwealth of Australia.
Absolutely. And thank you, Nicola, for also having me on.
You're welcome. So the three of us have actually done a fair bit of speaking together. We all have our different strengths in different areas. It's incredible to me that as far as I can see, you two are the most prominent, the most outspoken former senators that I see sort of emerging from the body politic, past and present. And I'm really surprised that other people who've been involved in us getting to this point in history, in Australia in particular, haven't sort of come forward and offered anything up. So I have a lot of respect for both of you. So thanks for coming on this. I think it's really, really important because my feeling is, and a lot of people that watch this podcast, is that a lot does hang on the result of the US election. And it's extraordinary to think that so many countries in the world, particularly the Five Eyes nations, our future and what the future looks like is going to hang on which way that election goes, whatever you think or believe about elections and election integrity. But as far as Australia goes, and what I've tried to do with GAP, and I've really enjoyed working with you, Rod, and also you, Len, is I want to just break down some of the things that are like hot button issues for people in Australia. And of course, we've just been through a really difficult period in history with regard to healthcare, and we'll get onto that in a minute. But we've got a king's visit in October. The King Charles III is arriving in Australia in October in a couple of weeks. I've noticed that the skies are clearing so that all the flowers come out. We tend to do that when we have a royal visitor in the UK. And so I thought we'd have a look ahead of the King's visit at really what he's going to learn and what he's going to expect in Australia. So the hot button issue, I think, right now is energy. So I thought we'd start there. And I've got some stats, right, that I want to read out to you both. And after I read these stats out, I'd like your opinion on this and what you think about it. So I've learned over the last couple of weeks during my research that Australia is already energy independent. It's already energy efficient. In fact, it's got so many sources of energy. We ship most of it overseas.
Absolutely.
Which I have no problem with as long as those sales are reflected in the wealth of the common people, the Commonwealth of Australia. But
absolutely,
we all know that they're not, right, Rod? So in Australia, we export 56% of the world's iron ore. Extraordinary. We've got 1,200 years supply of coal. We export 28% of the world's uranium deposits. We export 28% of the world's gas exports. And as per the land, and I know we're going to get onto the land and property later with you, Len, there are 3.4 Australians for every kilometre of land. So we are, I guess, underpopulated for those who are interested in population levels in the world. I don't know who wants to start, but why do you think there's why are we being sold, I believe, a false bill of goods that there is an energy problem in Australia when in fact Australia is energy rich?
Well, in simplistic terms, the reasons why we're being sold is because we essentially, as a nation, have vacated our true parliament and allowed a corporation that only feeds on profits and does not want to filter things back to the bona fide or true beneficiary, which are the Australian people. So while we're operating outside of the protection of our Commonwealth, because the Commonwealth is the wealth of the commoner, that's where it's got to be. And of course, we have to understand our history in order to go forward. And can I just quickly say, before I get on to answer your question, that both myself, Senator Len Harris, and myself are both former federal senators. So once a federal senator, always a federal senator. So we never stop doing our job, and we want to do the job in the best interest of the Australian people. But we are being our industries or our extractable industries, which is your coal, and of course we're the second biggest exporter of coal in the world, and yet we've got to try and this nonsense of getting down to net zero by 2050, which you're true in what you say. When people buy our coal overseas, they don't make coal, make ornaments. They burn it and put it into emissions. So, unfortunately, while we're outside the protection of the Crown and our Commonwealth, these corporations will continue to take the profits and the resources of this great nation. And until the people stop and smell the roses and take a constitutional correction and kick back and hold these corporations to account, it will continue. And while it continues, you see the suffering of Australians every day. And we're now getting controlled by overseas investors. And that is the way they're coming in to be able to get the wealth of this great nation, by coming in through the back door and basically raiding our fridge. So that's why Len and I are very prominent in what we do, because the constitutional duty of a federal senator is to make sure that the whole country is running under its law as what was granted at federation by our forefathers, and to make sure that the states are fully compliant to the laws of the Commonwealth. And Labor have taken us away of that in 1973, and the other major parties have continued to go along with the scheme. So we're no longer the master. We've made the parliament the master, or the corporation the master, and we've become the servant. So until we take a correctional check, this will continue on, and we'll have all our rights usurped. Or in actual fact, usurp's not the right word. Our rights have been stolen.
And you actually see remedy for this, don't you, Rod? Because you talk about this in your speeches, because you do believe, and I do believe, that we can get Australia back on the tracks of its real constitution, the Commonwealth Constitution 1900 UK. Do you think it's possible? Is it a possible future to Australia, for Australia to get back there?
Well, I don't say getting Australia back is the right way to pitch it, Nicola. It's already here. We don't have to get it back. All we have to do is basically go back home to our rights and privileges. So go back to our Commonwealth Parliament, where our protections lie. So it's not about getting the country back. The country's here. We do own the country. What we've got to do is step inside the jurisdiction where our rights are upheld, whereas while we're operating outside under an Australian government and not a Commonwealth Parliament, that corporation can only grant us privileges. It can't grant us a right.
Yeah.
And why we are accepting, like a general acceptance or a truism, that we believe that we've been governed pursuant to the law of this great nation, which we're not, clearly not. Now, the law makes that claim. We're only ever going to have to pay for privileges. So Len and I are very much out there, which will canvass obviously with property rights, because that's really getting it right home to the Australian people. We've got to come back under the rights and protection of the Crown and our laws. So we have to go back to our parliament that's been vacated and uphold our rights. So yes, it's not about getting the country back. Our country's here. We just need to put it back on the right constitutional rail track and steer our train for the benefit of all Australian people. And the law says it's there. It can happen. It's just we need the people to make it happen now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I kind of see it that Australia's being pilfered, right? We've got these corporations coming
It's
in.
been robbed.
Yeah.
It's
the-
been hijacked. It's a hostile takeover. There is no question about that. And our rights have been robbed. They've just been, and because there's been no management over the last 50 years, and you talk about King Charles coming out,
Mm,
there's a real issue in the federal Senate at the moment, who's doing business as the Commonwealth Senate, but it's not, and that's what I spotted in 2016. There's no head of power to create a new Royal Styles and Title Act to
yeah.
recognise the corporate name of King of Australia. And that's why the Senate's in all disarray. In actual fact, Australia is operating without a law at all at the moment, purported or otherwise. There is no law because they haven't created a new Styles Title Act
Yeah.
to put it all into a corporate jurisdiction, let alone being in the Commonwealth jurisdiction.
Yeah. When I first arrived in Australia in the 90s, someone close to me who was an Australian said at the time in the 90s, you need to be really careful in Australia. It's not like the UK. This place is the Wild West. And I laughed it off and I thought, what's he talking about? But the longer I've been in Australia, the more I learn that, it's very, very difficult for Australians to get true remedy. You've got court orders that aren't enforceable. You've got this what people call lawfare instead of warfare, and you've experienced yourself that as well, Rod. So they drain your finances down and the people don't have a voice, and we've got, I was on a broadcast with a sitting senator a few weeks ago, and he was talking about the Australia Act. I may as well name him because these people have to be held to account. It was Malcolm Roberts, and we were on the Cafe Looked Out podcast that was sort of a podcast-a-thon. And I was asked not to be argumentative, and it was really hard because he stated that the Australia Act was the only constitution voted on by the people of Australia. And so I behaved myself, but I wanted to jump around and inform him, no, actually, Mr. Roberts, they did not vote on that. What are you talking about? These are sitting senators and they don't seem aware of this stuff, Rod. What's going on?
Well, look, no disrespect to Malcolm Roberts, but he'd think that all flying insects were delivered without wings, and he is constitutionally deficit. And in actual fact, when I worked with Senator Roberts, when I was doing the terms and reference to the Royal Commission, where I went back to the 1902 Royal Commission Act, and Len will back me up on this, when it came to the executive power to empower that act to take on the banks and have a bona fide Royal Commission, I needed a Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of Australia. And of course, Malcolm Turnbull was not the Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of Australia, he was the Prime Minister of the Australian government, which is not recognised throughout our constitution. And that's when I started to cotton on that the whole country was being run out of jurisdiction. Malcolm Roberts used to come to me in order to get constitutional advice. And
well, that's good. You're a good person for that.
No, it's not good, because a federal senator, the very first page, his constitutional sworn duties. Now, I want to say that very clear. Constitutional sworn duties is to uphold the laws of the Commonwealth. Well, if Malcolm Roberts is not going to take the time to read Odgers and read Quick and Garran and understand what the founding law or it's the title deeds to our country, it's the fundamental law that runs this great nation. If he's not prepared to take those service manuals, because that's what they really are, it's like taking a car to BMW and pulling out the service manuals in your glove box and making sure that you're not trying to fit a Hyundai Turbo on a BMW X5 or whatever, M5 or whatever they are. That's what he has to do. He has to be trained and understand, because he's given those tools, and Senator Len Harris will tell you about that. And you must understand what the letters patent mean. So it's a patent, and of course I'm an inventor, so this is how I could understand that an infringer, when you start infringing something by creating a Queen of Australia to try and override your executive power, that of Queen of the United Kingdom, No, that's an infringement to our patent, and that's how, and that's a copyright too. The Australian Constitution
Yeah.
is not the Commonwealth of Australia Constitution, so that's a copyright as well.
Hmm.
So, but look, Nicola, the you know, the message is reverberating right around the world, and even Trump and America, they understand their constitutional
Yeah.
laws better than what we do. However, they're already also out saying we've got to come back under their they have to come back under their constitution. So we've allowed all these corporations, which can only ever be regulated. They can't be created by a bona fide parliament. A parliament can only regulate a corporation. We've allowed this to be created outside our law and use that with limited liability to come in and cut the guts out of this great nation, and then everyone hide behind underneath the corporate veil and say, well, it wasn't me, it wasn't me. No, it's not good enough. The people need to understand we have a duty to leave it to our future generations, and that's why Len and I get out in our mobile units, which is what Len's and I are doing, and we've got to make sure that the people give it our best shot, that the people need to come back. It's the restoration of the Commonwealth. Let's get back our Commonwealth, get back our Commonwealth, get back your rights, and away we go.
Yeah. Now, Senator Len, you were a senator as well. So were you very aware, patently aware of this sort of, did it feel like a subversion of democracy in a way?
No, because it wasn't an issue really that was raised. But coming back to the issue for today with the renewable energy, a farmer in Australia, if they so much as cut down a single tree, that's spotted by a satellite, and that person is put through the hoops in the courts.
Mm.
And yet we have throughout the whole of Australia both solar panels that are being installed, and the government is claiming that it is in the national interest. Therefore, they bypass all of the rules and regulations about a business operating in Australia.
Yes.
I know in North Queensland, where we have the largest World Heritage area, there are thousands of hectares of rainforest being bulldozed down to put wind farms up.
Mm.
And again, that is being achieved by the federal government declaring it in the national interest. So they can't have it both ways. They can't take the actual farmers who are producing our food, our grains and everything, taking them to court and charging them up to $600,000 in fines, and yet have these people come in, rape and pillage the land throughout Australia. Yeah. And the land that these absolutely humongous solar panels are being set up on are all being set up on primary farming land, producing food.
That's my problem. That's my problem, Len, is that they call them solar farms and wind farms. Farms produce food. Right now, only a small percent of Australia compared to other countries in the world is arable. It's arable farmland. So I don't understand why I see green fields around me in Victoria that are completely covered with these solar panels. I guess the incentives are just too great. But you could move them. You could move them just off the arable land and get the same effect, probably better because it's warmer out there, and that's why it's not arable. And so it seems to me like it's an agenda to reduce the amount of farmland we have. Is that correct?
And absolutely. And we have an absolutely appalling situation occurring in Western Australia, Rod's home state, he was kind enough to send me an image of the Premier of Western Australia demanding that the Western Australian Parliament gives him absolute impunity to actually take back land. He doesn't define what that land is going to be,
Yeah.
but he wants to be able to resume private property without even paying compensation for it.
Yeah.
So the governance of Australia is absolutely totally out of control.
Yeah.
And that's why we need this reassessment of who are we?
Yeah.
Are we a company or are we the Commonwealth of Australia?
Absolutely.
In the company, as Rod said earlier, we only get privileges.
Yes.
We don't have any rights.
And who would want to give up their rights and hand them over for privileges?
Yeah.
I shared a clip yesterday because when Anthony Albanese put me on the ABC News when I was opposing the Voice of Parliament referendum, he said very clearly, so clearly that the ABC put a note above it that said in context, because apparently he's taken out of context. And he said, it's ridiculous. Some people are out there online saying it's the end of all property rights in Australia. That's ridiculous. Can you imagine such a thing? And then here we are. That's exactly what they're doing. I mean, it's extraordinary to me that these people are getting away with it. And of course, while they're doing that, I mean, Anthony Albanese just signed this in America, this UN Future Pact for the Future, right? Which is all about this managed retreats, where they're moving people out of the countryside and into these smart cities. But he didn't come back to Australia and talk about signing the UN Pact for the Future without any public consultation. He came back and talked about crisps, chip packets, and how many chips are in there versus air. I think these people, they're just deliberately focusing on things that don't matter. They're treating the Australian public like fools. People have had enough of it, and they're not even reading the comments on social media. It's as if they don't care what we think.
Well, it's a distraction.
Yeah, it's the age-old from the Roman senators. Yes, feed them bread and circuses.
Yes,
so
circuses are everywhere.
Yes, absolutely. And the other area, which is the elephant in the room that Australians are totally unaware of, is that every state government has cancelled the certificates of title, the legal documents that proves a person owns their property.
Yes.
They have all been cancelled individually by the individual premiers of the states. And this behests the question for the Premier of Western Australia, was that done as a prelude for him so he can take land off people?
Yeah.
I know you're aware of it occurring in Victoria.
Yeah. Yeah, it's extraordinary. I was talking to Rod about this the other day because we sort of laid a trap for AI where we asked ChatGPT if Australia was running counter to its constitution, and ChatGPT, their own AI, came back and said, yes, it was, because there was no referendum for the Australia Act. And of course, they fell into the trap because they ran away and reprogrammed it. Luckily, we'd taken screenshots and stuff. But I was talking about how lots of people said as comments underneath that post, oh my God, that's terrible, because we all know that AI tells the truth because it's just taking facts and regurgitating facts. But of course it wasn't, because it was reprogrammed. Now that leads into the same thing you're saying about with the land titles. Once you remove that parchment paper title deed, which is proof of concept, proof of ownership, proof of land rights, and you've only got this digital lot number that they're issuing people, it's very much like that ChatGPT incident where they reprogrammed it and changed everything, because that, I believe, is what's going to happen with people's property rights. They could put native title liens on them if you're not seen as sort of following the agendas. I mean, apparently they're planning on having people spend in excess of $20,000 per home having it upgraded to be green, whether it needs it or not. So of course, I think in what you were saying, absolutely, it was a prelude to this agenda so they can get
Yes,
hands on it. The World Economic Forum call this monetizing the asset, but they're not monetizing their own assets, they're monetizing ours.
yes,
Yeah, well,
every Australian's.
Yeah.
absolutely. It's form and substance. That's what it comes down to. You know, electronic is just form. Substance is holding a Crown certificate of title in your hand and saying, hey, I've got it here. You know, this electronic, it's just another way to try and overcome and get around into feasibility, you know, for other people to put a claim against your property without you knowing. And then if you can't download the document, you're gone. But if you've got a paper title in a frame on your wall, not bad, is it?
The other thing also, we are correct in speaking to the Australian idol is to own your home.
Yeah.
Now, think about all of these people who have invested their life savings in a high-rise unit so that they are within the city and have the benefits of that. They also have no title.
Yeah. Yeah. So even
And
people
there
who
are
following,
millions of them.
yeah. So they're the people that, you know, even if they were sort of people who believed in the green movement and they were doing the right thing, you know, that they're also having their rights. Well, I guess, you know, I use that word a lot, subversive.
Totally removed.
And, you know, for a person to buy a house, generally, every single person I know, rich and poor, you're looking at, you know, in excess of 20 years, almost a lifetime of work to pay off that home. That's what's happened
Correct.
over the last couple of generations. And not only are they whipping away those rights, it means that those properties can't be left to children. And most people who bought a home bought it on the basis that they'd have something to leave their kids. I mean, I'm pretty amazed that Australians aren't more up in arms about this. I know that they took to the streets during the man-made
COVID.
pandemic. Yeah, and they were quite outraged about those health measures. But you know, we say in England as well, then an Englishman's home is his castle. So if they're coming for those and monetizing other people's assets, when do you think Australians will stop voting them in? Because there's that famous saying, isn't there? You can't do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. There has to be political change, right?
Correct.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. They need to sit down, assess very, very carefully what's being A, done to them, and B, what is predicted in the future. I remember vividly Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth was visiting Sydney, and it was to open the Opera House, and she asked very graciously to have morning tea with a council house, the occupants of it. So, yes, she did. So the day arrived, the cars all arrived, parked out the front of the little cottage, and Her Majesty declined to get out of the vehicle. And she sent her lady in waiting into the house, and there was a whisper, 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 and the front door was closed. Only when the front door was closed did Her Majesty get out of the car, walk up the path, and knock and request to be allowed in. That we have that same right, that nobody can enter our home without our consent. And what we have, all of these parliaments, state parliaments around Australia, now passing laws that purport to have the power for an authorised officer, which means that's wide open, has the right to walk into your home and assess it for, as you said before, its compliance with the environmental requests of the government. People own
like,
their homes in an indefeasible title, and it's in fee simple. Facebook, freehold is a myth. It doesn't exist in the Western society. And that's how the states get around, by telling us we hold our property in freehold. We don't. We hold our properties directly from the Crown, not through the state government, through the state governor, and it is in fee simple, which means it's divisive and can be deeded to your family in your will.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think people will collapse.
Watch out for that one.
I think people will collapse if people come to their door and say, you know, because most people as well, they don't have much, particularly now with inflation, but they don't have a lot of money and at the end of the week, the end of the month left over, because they're pouring a larger percentage of their income into their mortgages as it is. People are doing 2 or 3 jobs.
Yes.
You know, that their home is really either their major asset or their only asset. And I think if people start entering homes and properties and they're, you know, they're going to get bits of paper stuck to the door saying you've got 30 days to make these $40,000 changes, or we're going to seize your property, or you have to leave. I mean, these are the people that this Labour government and also the Liberal government, the Morrison government, they talk a lot about mental health issues and taking care of people with mental health. They are causing so many mental health issues because people are so afraid of what's coming. I think it's absolutely outrageous that they would put Australians through this without any, what I consider any plausible reason why. And I think that all of these climate change measures, these net zero measures, including all the geoengineering we're seeing in the skies, not this week though, because the king is coming. I think it's because it's plausible deniability, right? If you've got climate change, well, why would you object to all this with your home? Don't you want to save the planet? So that gives them plausible deniability on that front. Then you've also got the pandemics and the healthcare stuff that they're trying to ram through with the World Health Organization. And of course, if there's a risk of a pandemic, why wouldn't you take an experimental injection? It's plausible deniability. You're at fault because you're not trying to protect people. You're at fault because you don't want to save the planet. And, you know, someone said to me a couple of weeks ago, what they've done here is essentially alchemy. They've used the law as alchemy to crowbar in the agendas they want, even though if you take it under God's law, most of it is unlawful, right? This is unlawful what's happening.
Yes, absolutely.
But they've used a corporation, which is an entity, a dead entity out front, saying you will do this and you will do that. And when a dead entity, there's no controlling mind. They haven't brought the controlling mind to the front.
Yeah.
And it's like ScoMo, getting back to what you said about Albanese, you know, the federal parliament or the Australian government is not trying to take people's land. Well, hang on. Yeah, that's probably a true statement. But what about your premiers doing business as premiers, not premiers? These people doing, I call the state parliaments a daycare centre for would-be, if they could be, politicians. But and that's probably a good place to, unfortunately, we pay for that. But they're the ones doing the heavy lifting for the Australian government. And because if the whole country is not running under its founding deed, which is the Commonwealth of Australia, how may I be in the state of Western Australia? Because the state, we only became a state of Western Australia when we federated under a British Act. But now that we're claiming to run under an Australia Act, which is not a constitution, I might add. No. Everyone thinks it is, but it's not. And then how may we be a state? And this is the whole thing. The whole whole system has come off its axis. It's
It's a
rotten to
house
the
of
core.
cards, Rod. Surely it's a house of cards that can
It
fall at
is.
any time. That's how I see it. What amazes me is sometimes when I'm working with the lovely people at Gap, and I come across, I noticed an act that was sent to me, and just because it was associated with a freedom of information request we were putting in. And the act was the Governance, Performance and Accountability Act of 2013. 2013 is reasonably recent. And in this act, it talks about the two types of government. It talks about the body corporate side of government, and that's A. And then it talks about B, the non-corporate side of government, the Commonwealth government, which we don't seem to have currently. But then underneath there was a note, and the note said that the corporate side of government, the body corporate, which is the only one we have now, is legally separate from the Commonwealth. Legally separate from the Commonwealth. So what that says to me is that they've got carte blanche to do anything they want, because the Commonwealth can absolve itself of responsibility for what this corporate government does.
Well, a corporate government is not a body politic. And that's the difference. It's not a body politic. They go on about the Commonwealth of Australia. You know, I often get into, when I get the chance, fire a shot into these so-called representatives that are sitting doing business as a member of parliament, who are all in, you know, where there's a real issue about whether they have their seats or not. But that's another issue. And certainly, let's have a look at Elbow. Having an Italian farmer, Italian, he probably was a farmer. And I put an FOI into his, and then it was transferred to the Prime Minister in Cabinet, and they wouldn't release the document to say whether or not he'd renounced his citizenship. So now there's a strong inference that we may have a Prime Minister that's a dry blower and has no power whatsoever to even go over, not only sit in an Australian government or even go over and represent the people of Australia, because he's representing citizens when in actual fact true representation of the people of the Commonwealth, whereas the people of this great nation. So, you know, and until you know, it's like putting a CEO into your business. You know, at some point in time, you got to have a little check and say, you know, is he doing the right thing? Otherwise, he can run away with your customers, create another corporation.
Performance review. That's what we need, Rod, a performance review.
Yeah, well, that's what Australians have to do, a performance review. And you know, the law is very much on our side here, and we cannot get in trouble for telling the truth.
No.
And you're right, the AI that came back with what you mentioned was saying exactly word for word what, you know, I'd been saying since 2016, when I'd seen this departure in the Royal Commission Act, the Royal Styles and Title Act of 1973 and the Statute Law Revision Act 1973, where the Commonwealth is removed and replaced with Australia without it going to a referendum to the Australian people. I mean, you know, that is so bad by Labor. And everyone thought Whitlam had done the right thing. And Malcolm, that's why he got sacked, and Malcolm Fraser runs on with the scam.
Yeah.
I mean, who are these people to do this to us?
Yeah. There's been no transparency with Australians. And look, I know that most people, a lot of, well, maybe before 4 years ago, but most people don't have a huge interest in politics and what's going on politically until it affects their lives. But I still think that there should have been a lot more public transparency about what was going on. I mean, you've got certain people, you know, at events and stuff saying that Australia's a republic. There was a referendum and Australia voted that it didn't want to be a republic,
well,
that it wanted to stay the Commonwealth.
Malcolm Roberts came out and openly said that we got a corporate queen. Australia's a republic, and it's operating outside the Constitution. I mean, he's never come back to correct it.
Yeah.
But you know, if let's have a look at an Australian, right? And this is I mean, I must admit, the Australian women are very strong in this country. I'm sorry, I'm a guy. Australian men aren't so strong. But, you know, if I was coming through the back door of my neighbour's house and he didn't know me and I was stealing his frothies out of the fridge and he caught me, then that Aussie would be very upset and probably give me a bit of a disciplining. But when someone starts to steal the nation, he just pops another top, looks at the footy and goes, she'll be right, mate. We'll get there. You know what I mean?
But
Because
it's not the 80s or the 90s anymore. You can't sort of sit there, and this is the message I try and give to Australians. We can't sit on our hands anymore and think someone else is going to fix this. There's a whole bunch of people who don't sleep, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, have been planning this for decades. And if we don't stand up, if Australians don't stand up now and push back to even stop some of this stuff happening, it is going to get worse. I mean, can you imagine that things would get worse for us than where they are now? I mean, the pricing of food, if you just look at food pricing in Australia, Albo talks about how many chips are in a packet. What about real food? Right? What about how much it costs for mums to put food on the table? Rod, one of the most emotional phone calls I ever had with you was when you were upset because you'd seen a mother in Western Australia living in the car with her kids, getting them ready for school. Do you want to tell us about that?
yeah, I was out walking early as I always do, and I was in Perth. I was actually in Armidale, and I went past this truck bay, and because I'm a country boy, I get around, and look, I have seen single mothers out in truck bays, which has been very disturbing. And often with the coach, I try not to invade their privacy, but I sort of yell out, do they want a cup of coffee, and let them have a look at the side of the bus and make them a cup of coffee. And they've always got dogs for protection. But this morning was really harrowing because I went into this car park, and not only one, but two single mothers, two mothers were dressing their children for school, and they'd been camping in the back of this car. They had a bit of an awning with a sheet, and it was and she was a decent person, lovely kids, and it just broke my heart. It should not, those kids and that mother are entitled to the wealth of this country. What is being extracted or primary produced or whatever in Australia, she is an Australian. And if she was under the Commonwealth, she would have a right to the benefits. As a beneficiary, she would have a right to the portion of profits. And that's how it is. But there she is, homeless. How the kids get by, I don't know. How she's not vulnerable to perhaps get, raped or whatever. She's unprotected. And unfortunately, the police, they don't care. The WA police, my best mates, they don't care. They just don't care anymore.
It's someone else's problem. And that's what annoys me is so many of these politicians who give themselves pay rises and fly around on private jets the way the Greens do, very, very green. They seem blinkered to the plight of Australians. You see, I don't know what's different about me compared to those politicians, but I just can't stomach it. I can't be blinkered to it. When I see it, I have to look at it and know about it and feel it. I mean, I think they're more or less telling us how they think about us when they do this stuff. I mean, for Australia to gift away 53 to 56% of all its natural gas to greedy corporations who then sell it for money and then don't pay taxes on the profit, and Australians don't see any of that. Who made that decision? Who walked over to someone in a room in a meeting and said, hey, is it okay to give away 53, 56% of Australian gas for nothing, just so these corporations keep running well and trading here? Because I'm like you, Rod. I think if the real parliament was open, and people need to know watching this in Australia and overseas, when they closed what they call Old Parliament House, they didn't open what is called New Parliament. They opened the Australia Government Building. So there isn't actually a People's Parliament, because I believe if it was reopened, then what would happen is the corporate side of government, and in principle, I don't have a problem with the corporate side of government if, as you say, it was contributing to the wealth of the common people. It would have to walk down with these decisions to the People's Parliament and say, hey, we're considering giving away 56% of all natural gas in Australia for nothing. Can we get a tick in that box? Then the answer, if I was in the real parliament, would be a resounding no, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And an example of how preposterous the selling of our gas overseas is. First of all, the price is 3 cents per cubic metre liquid.
Wow.
And on top of that, Australia actually paid for the tankers to shift it. Now, anybody who is actually running around Australia on gas in their car are now paying either $1 or just over $1 per litre, not metre.
Yeah.
So we're
God.
paying 1,000 times more for gas to put in our cars than what the Australian economy is getting the result of it. And that's 3 cents sale price. So how much?
They're showing us who they are.
How much is going to the government in royalties out of 3 cents a litre?
They're showing us who they are.
Three.
This is what they're doing. They're showing us who they are. I did a podcast a few weeks ago called The Proof is in the Pudding. So what they are showing is they are a corporate government that cares a lot more about their corporate friends and corporate relationships. It's a corporatocracy, the Americans call it. And they don't care so much about the people, right? But it's the people that are supposed to elect these governments, right? So they've shown us unequivocally now, it was going on for decades, but during the last 4 years, we know for sure that they are not overly concerned with the plight of Australians, right? So we must get some leaders in power. We must get some senators in the Senate who care about people over profits.
Correct.
But Nicola,
and
Nicola.
Nicola, you raised before about Albanese going overseas and signing us up to the WHO.
Yeah, UN.
The real problem is not totally directed towards the Labor Party. John Howard, when he was Prime Minister of Australia, brought a bill through the Senate that actually purports to say, and it was passed, that international law takes precedence over Australian law. Now, how many Australians know that?
Gee, so even I didn't know that.
Don't aim all your arrows at the Labor Party. Save a few for the bloody Liberals and Nationals as well.
Absolutely, because they're all wings of the same bird. But Nicola, it's a comment came back to me that as far as the UN and going into the New World Order, and they claim that the Australian people have consented through their representatives, and because that's who they elected. But it's the people whose intentions are being deprived at the ballot box, because when an election kicks off, if you look at the corflutes, the offer that they put out to the Australian people, it is a corporation. It is not written in English. Most times it's, if you look at their, let's say it's Bill Smith. Bill is written in English, Smith is in all caps. So the intentions of the Australian people when they go to vote, thinking they're voting for a Commonwealth Parliament, are in actual fact voting for a corporation. And those people come out and say, I'm going to represent you for the electorate of O'Connor. I'm going to represent you as a senator for Western Australia. But they never said they're going to defend you or defend your rights. So represent you. Yeah, okay, I'm representing you. I'll put you into commerce. Right. We're now in a corporation. I didn't say I was going to do to defend you. I'm here to represent you. So we are being hoodwinked at the ballot box. And to me, that's a deception. That is a serious deception. And like Senator Harris has said to me many times, why isn't the Australian Electoral Commission, which is also a corporation, I might add, and they're the best, they're my best friends at the moment. I don't have too many friends in those sort of circles. And I don't want to be friends with a corporation. No. Only because they'd suck my wallet, they'd suck my wallet dry. But the whole thing is, why isn't the writ put up at the ballot box? and it's not. It's been removed. So in actual fact, it purports to be
an
an
election.
election.
Yeah, exactly. Look, I want to simplify for people with regard to this all caps issue as well. So, people generally want to know about, their representative, their MP, their senator, and they say, what are your policies and what do you believe in? And what are your thoughts about climate change and healthcare and all that stuff? But they also need to take on board how they're being presented, right? So basically, when you look at the corflutes, the posters, whether it's out on the street, stuck on a fence, outside the election itself, or on the side of a bus, what they need to check for, if it's in capitals, if their name is in capitals, you are voting for someone who is going to do the bidding of the corporation, right?
Absolutely.
And when you say in English, it means if it was Nicola, the N is big and everything else is small. And then you know that you're voting for someone who wants to represent you in the Commonwealth, the common people, right? And then the oath. Do you want to go into the oath? Because that's a whole different thing as well.
Len?
That was a quick flick past. Yeah, in actuality, Rod has a list of prime ministers. We'll start with them.
Right.
And yeah, none of them actually swore an oath to the sovereign of Great Britain.
Wow.
The majority of them are actually outlandishly saying that they serve the people, right, and honour the Queen of Australia.
Which is a
The
company.
Queen of Australia cannot exist because in the Constitution, the first 9 sections of the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Australia is actually the English Empowering Act that was passed in 1900. It's Act 63 and 64 Victoria. So in section 2, it says very, very clearly that a reference to the Queen, so that's referring to
Yep.
Queen Victoria,
Yep.
her heirs and successors, is tied intrinsically to Great Britain.
Yeah. It's
So how
clause
can we have
Well, people
a
need to
queen
realize
in
as well.
Australia?
Yeah.
Yeah,
People need to
a
realize
Queen
that
of Australia.
because
So
the Queen of
then the just bear with me for a moment.
yeah.
So then the second offence is when Whitlam
Yeah.
in 73 did 2 things. He altered the titles, styles, and signet of the sovereign.
Yeah.
And if we go back to the Statute of Westminster, and I've got to put this up on my website too, in 1931, Australia, to all contents, became totally independent because the parliaments then, not only could they pass legislation right through in our parliaments, they could also enter into contracts overseas as well.
Right.
The rider in the Statute of Westminster is, however, a bill that touches the titles, style, and signet of the sovereign is void.
Yeah.
So therefore, Whitlam's attempt to alter the title, styles, and signets was void before he even started. So then the next thing that he did was he removed the word Commonwealth from all Australian legislation. So in doing that, he then offended Section 5 of the English Empowering Act.
Right.
And because it clearly states that all laws are made under this Constitution of the Commonwealth of Australia.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do, we're going to London by hell or by hook. And we are asking for the Governor-General and all the governors of the states, their position to be vacant.
Yeah.
And a Governor-General appointed under the Constitution.
Yes.
Once, and we need 100,000 signatures to actually achieve that. And the ability to sign them are both on Rod's website and thesilentmajority.au as well. So there is a process to reverse what the governments, the corporate entities have done.
Yeah.
And the lovely thing about that is it's actually being exercised by the people of the Commonwealth.
Yeah.
Yep.
We need to start that process ASAP. Now, just a couple of things, and then I'll get your comments on a couple of things. I was told one of the reasons that these bureaucrats have not been swearing the correct oath is because that means then they cannot be liable for treason. And also, I wanted to mention that this Queen of Australia Corporation actually does not have the permission of the people to create laws and bills, right? Because there would have needed to be a referendum for people to say, okay, this entity, the Queen of Australia, can pass bills and laws. Is that correct?
Yeah.
That is absolutely correct. Not only is it correct, in actuality, when Queen Elizabeth was presented with a printed bill of the Australia Act, she declined to give it royal assent. In actuality, she wrote her name, Elizabeth and the second, in the top right-hand corner and drew a line underneath it. So what she had done at law there, she had actually taken control of the bill, taken it off the Australian government.
Yeah.
And said, no, you can't have it.
Yeah.
So the audacity, and I'll say it, of some bureaucratic asshole who stupidly then in a black Nico pen put the date under the
I
line.
saw that.
Come on, guys.
You know, people may not know.
Like, stupid is stupid.
Very Australian, a black texter. People may not know this, but this is royal protocol.
Yeah.
For the Queen to have just read a document, she signs the front. That's what that meant. She didn't date it because it wasn't a signature page. So when the Queen, any monarch signs the front of a document, it's to say this monarch has read the document. Just like when people get a car loan or a mortgage, if she was to sign that assent on, it would have to have signature pages and initials, just like us on every page, correct?
No. The sovereign, like they'd be there for days. No, I'll give you an example. In 1953, when Menzies proposed an alteration to the title, styles, and signet, right? Again, it has to go to the printer first, comes back, goes to the Executive Council.
Yeah.
Queen Elizabeth in 53 correctly signed Elizabeth II.
Yeah.
And dated it in her, not only her handwriting, but with the same pen.
Yes.
So that means that the sovereign has given royal assent.
Ah, okay.
And yes, so, and I say to people, when you're interacting with these corporations, make sure you put your details in the top right-hand corner.
Yeah.
And immediately under your name, print private person. And then your address.
Okay.
The corporation that you're writing to, you put on the left-hand side of the page, subservient to you.
Yeah.
So you're not only do you own the document, you're the creditor in that document, and the entity that is on the left is the debtor. And always sign yours truly, if it's commercial, on the bottom right-hand side.
Shall I tell you what really annoys me about this, about Australia and about all of this that's gone on, these shenanigans with this corporate side and Queen of Australia and all this. I talk about this in my speeches as well. There is a premise in courts, and at some point in life, most people end up in court over something, at one point or another, a custody battle, a divorce, whatever. You know, they always say that ignorance of the law is no defense, and we have to take that on board. Ignorance of the law is no defense. And yet, we don't teach our Australian children anything about the law or anything about their constitution anymore in schools. And yet, when they do something wrong, and it's going to get worse with all these new, net zero bylaws, then they say, oh, well, too bad, so sad. Ignorance of the law is no defense, but sorry, we didn't teach you about the law.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And
It's
that,
very
So
that's
Her
important.
Majesty, oh, sorry, just last thing, Rod. Her Majesty did not give assent to the Australia Act. And actually, in the English Act that was passed by the House of Commons, the Australia Act UK, Her Majesty requested that Section 15 be put in, and Section 15 says in layman's term, if this act impacts on the Australian Constitution, it must be put to referendum before it is administered.
So can we
So
call
I
referendum
don't
now?
ever remember a referendum
No, there isn't.
asking the Australian people if they want to become the Australian government.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Can
think
we have a referendum now, a retroactive referendum where we can unseat the Queen of Australia, the corporation? Do you think? Can we do that?
well,
Uh,
no, because can I just say this? You can't have a referendum under a corporate law that doesn't exist. You got to have a
Right.
referendum under the Commonwealth. But can I just come back and just correct? So the first clauses, clause 2 is definitely the executive power is the United Kingdom of our Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act.
Yeah.
And all the Australian people are bound at clause 5. So we as Australians have contracted to the laws of the United Kingdom. We haven't contracted to the Australian laws. So it should have gone to a referendum, and Senator Harris is right. There is, I think it also Section 5(2), Len, is, is what the Australia Act is still subject to the Commonwealth Constitution.
Correct, it is.
It's not the founding deed. You don't go to a bank. If you go to a bank, they want to see ID. You don't sign your name as, like, if it's Rod Cullen, I don't sign it as Rod Bush Tucker, do I? I mean, that might be my nickname, or Cully. They go, no, you got to sign your right name. So this Queen of Australia is not Queen of the United Kingdom. What is Queen of Australia? Well, it's a bush chook that no one's ever seemed to have found.
So what that means, though, what you're saying about clause 5, Rod, what that means is that the people of Australia actually have a lawful responsibility to not adhere to the dictates of this corporation, right?
Absolutely.
Correct.
We are contractually bound to go and deal with this nonsense. And, it's our duty, and our well-being and so forth. But I mean, trying to push an Australian is like trying to push a bloody tractor with flat tires and no fuel in the tank. I mean, we're trying to hook a rope onto them, at least give them a hand without the rubbers peeling off the rim, but at least get them moving so we can go past, have the potential of going past the compressor and blowing a bit of wind in them.
And they need
That's
to.
what
We
we
need to
want.
be able to get that tractor going, right? Because by the time everyone's out of their homes, and when they get you out of your home because you haven't paid the 47,000 to go green because you can't, and they do this managed retreat, which means they decide where you go and live, and of course it's going to be in a smart city. It's going to be too late, Australia. It will be too late to fix all
Yes,
this.
way too late.
Way too
Well,
late.
in 1982, a Labor, I think I may be reiterating this, and if I am, but I just want to bring it to the attention, it's worth doing. In 1982, Labor said they had to get rid of the Commonwealth flag and get it back to a corporate flag. So the red one went out the door and
Boo.
the blue came in, corporate.
Yeah. Mm.
Obviously, there was a change to fiat currency. You know, we lost the pound and went to dollars. So now we're completely away from, you know, we should be under pounds and pence, shillings or whatever. And then it says we've got to remove the Senate and remove the Commonwealth Constitution. Get rid of it. I
What?
mean, that's in their own constitution in 1982.
That's
We've got to
bad.
become a republic. And that's what
Yes.
they've been successfully doing. It's gradualism.
Yeah.
Slow. It's like Kikuyu taking over your Sir Walter Buffalo. Yeah, oh, it's still grass. Or, you know, look at the Australian merino, you know, because I'm a farmer, but you've got African wassies out there and they're saying, no, that's a sheep. Well, no,
Yeah.
we want the Australian merino. No, but it still eats, you know, but these politicians would know which end of a sheep ate grass. They probably
Yeah.
thought it was a camel. I mean,
They
and
have very healthy bank accounts, and that's all they care about.
well,
Listen,
that's it. And all these politicians go in, and Len and I are still trying to work out how our salary was, and you know, we came out. In actual fact, I came out with a deficit because, you know, though any harder, and anyway, we won't go there. But you know, why haven't we become multimillionaires, Len?
well, that's the
We
thing.
didn't sell our vote, but isn't it interesting
That's right.
how these people go into Parliament on a 300 or 400, or you know, senators $199,000 a year,
Yeah.
and come out with multi-millions of dollars. You know, I keep scratching my head. Len and I must have missed something. Obviously, maybe we didn't budget well at the
No, it's nothing
parliamentary
to do with
cafe,
budgeting.
Len. Maybe that's what it was.
What I think is, I call them the vote brokers, right? So you don't want to vote for a vote broker because they know that their votes are so valuable. So I know that in America they call them lobbyists, but I'm sure it's the same in Australia, where they get people in their ear saying, you know, this is how we want it to go. This is how we want you to vote. Because, you know, a lot of these parties that were supposed to be independent, like the Greens, the Teals, the Animal Justice Party, they just go right ahead and support Labour a lot. They supported Liberals when it was the Morrison government. And they don't seem to be independent thinking at all. They're just vote broking their votes. So they're like their backup friends, right? If they can't push something through, they've got their backup friends. Now, listen, I could talk to you guys all day long, and people who go to our speeches will know that it can go on for 5 or 6 hours. But because we're on a podcast, we've got to keep it short. Let's say this was episode 1 of the State of the Commonwealth with Nicola Charles, Rod Cullerton, and Len Harris. Guys, thank you so much for joining me. Obviously, we're going to keep looking at this. The geopolitical landscape is going to take a massive hit one way or the other following the US election. I'm hoping that you'll both come back and talk to me around that time. We've also got there's some news brewing as well, so we'll get you both on that. Thank you for joining us. Would you like to give some last words of hope each to Australians? We can fix this, right?
Okay, I'll go first on this one, Len, if that's okay.
You always do.
Yeah, I know. I just thought I'd be polite. Yeah, in wrap up, look, I have never taken my eye off the ball since 2016. I never wanted to be a career politician. I went in there I just, not by chance, but had to deal with issues that were happening with corporate banks taking over private property. But everything I've been saying has been quoted under the law, and being a federal senator, I was trained in that field, and I'm very happy to come out under my sworn constitutional duties and tell people the state of our great nation. However, if we do not act now, and I said in 2016 in my maiden speech, and I ask all your viewers to go and look my maiden speech up, I said we're at 1 minute to midnight back in 2016. We're 1 second to midnight now. Yeah. And I can tell you, if the Australian people do not step up, we will not have any Australian farmers left, family farmers. We will be losing all our primary productive pasture land to going back to bush. We'll be eating insects for protein, while all these elite nationals, who are the billionaires that will become the new one world government, which are above the parliament, and I'm sure they've got the power to pull these other guys in place, because there's been plenty of backhanders going over the years, and we will completely lose our rights. We still have a Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act. We have binding clauses from 1 to 9, and we have 128 sections. Section 59 is where the British Parliament has oversight. They've been asleep at the wheel. We need to all come together as a family, act as one, and get back our nation. And we need to do it now, because I'm telling you, this may be the last election, purported or otherwise. You know, I and Len can lead a horse to water, but we can't make it drink. But what we can do is express the law to the Australian people and remind them of their contractual duties at Clause 5 of the Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act. Get off your ass and get your country, not back. Let's go back and get our honest seat of government. And there is nothing they can do to prevent us from doing so.
Exactly. Wonderful. Senator Len.
Yes, absolutely. I agree totally with everything Rod has said. To the people out there, what we're setting out to do may actually seem daunting. No, it isn't. It is all based on fact. It's based on our Constitution and the rights of the people under the Commonwealth. So I'm prepared to put in the long hours and take the petition to the House of Commons. I already know that the House of Commons, because we will have over 100,000 signatures, are bound to bring on a bill to debate the petition. The only thing that's standing between Rod and I in achieving that is we need a lot of Australian people to go on all of our websites and on your podcasts. Download, there's a covering letter there so that they can understand the process of why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
Even if they only print one page and get one page of signatures, send it to the address that's on the covering letter, and I'm jumping a jet.
Yeah. And that's active democracy. People say, what can we do? Why can't we change it? This isn't fair. What's happening? That's active democracy that you can do. You can identify yourself with your name and address, and they know you're on the electoral roll, and you can actually help us make change. Thank you so much for both being on the podcast. I consider you both to be great Australians. I've been on the road doing speeches with you, and I can tell you now, these two guys are pit bulls. They are fighters. They've got more energy than I do. And I think I'm younger than both of you. I think I am, just slightly with Rod. But thank you so much for everything you're doing for Australians. We are very grateful. And I consider you both to be sort of still senators, unpaid senators, going around working for this country. And it just means the world. So thanks for jumping on. We'll get you back on again when the American election has happened, and we can see how that's going to affect things. This has been the White Rabbit Podcast. I'm the White Rabbit, also known as Nicola Charles. We'll see you next time.
Bye for now.